All right. Welcome, guys, to Solidworks Live. We're excited to have you here. My name's Steve. I'm one of the technical team members here at Solidworks, and I'll be the host for today. If this is your first time, welcome. We're excited to have you here. If you've been here before, then we're excited that you're back to take part in another one of these events. They remind me a lot of user groups and bringing the community together, learning as much from each other as you do from whatever content is being presented. So in the context of today, we're going to be walking through how to design a raised planter box. And to kind of give you some context and to set the stage, this was a project that I actually recently completed. And I was able to capture a lot of it in a short video. And so I want to just give you a chance to watch that. And in the meantime, while you're watching, take part in the chat. Let me know where you're from, and then we'll kind of dive into this. Hey, all right. Hey, Thanks. Sorry about that. Just realized that I was talking and you guys probably weren't hearing me. So I apologize for that. Hopefully you can hear me now. Maybe I'll check and make sure that we're back in business here. I think we're good now. Okay. Maybe a little bit of sound check. Sorry about that. Make sure we're good. All right, so hopefully we're back. Welcome back. All right, we're back. Great. Sorry about that. Okay, so back in business with sound. Let's go ahead and dive into modeling this up inside of Solidworks. So let's go ahead and we're going to do this utilizing a 3D sketch along with the Weldment environment. Weldments are great for being able to build out things that are structural in nature and that have constant sectional profiles, right? So a good way to do this is through the use of 3D sketches. Now, you honestly could do a whole session on 3D sketches, just tips, tricks, how to do them. But I'm gonna give you like my top 3 things that when I was learning them, helped me to fully understand the best way to just to make them useful and to help me get used to them. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you a little example here. And that is, right, so this is what we're used to doing, 2D planar sketches. If you think about, these are some Tinker toys I stole from my kids. You've got your sketch lines, you've got endpoints, and most of the time when we do a sketch, we're in plane, right? So that's a typical sketch for a lot of what we do. Now, when you get into 3D sketches, you get into scenarios like this, right? Again, we use that example where each of these are our sketch lines. These are our endpoints, if you will. And we're able to sketch in multiple planes, right? So we've got, some sketch segments here. We've got some that exist here. We've even got some that are in a non-orthogonal plane, right? So that's the idea behind a 3D sketch, is that we can draw in multiple planes, all right? And part of the reason I wanted to show that example is the fact that we can, we can do this inside of SolidWorks as well. And here's my first tip with this. The first one is that as you're drawing a 3D sketch, you get the little origin that shows up, and using the tab key reorients you to a different line of sight, right? So right now it's indicating that I'm in the XY plane. If I go ahead and click that and hit tab again, right now I'm in the YZ plane as well, right? And then if I want to just be, completely in a non-orthogonal direction, I can connect those two endpoints together, right? This is part of the reason why the Tinker toys are helpful, because this can kind of play some tricks on your on you. But that's the idea. And the tab key is what helps to really facilitate that, right? So that's tip number 1. Get comfortable with the tab key. Tip number 2 is if you do want to make sure you're locked into a plane, double click on it. Right? So double clicking on the top plane locks my focus on that plane. And now anything I draw is going to be in that plane. So we'll come up here and there's quite a bit of symmetry in this design. So we're going to use a center rectangle. And let's we'll make this 33, and we'll make the other direction 60. Okay. So these are my dimensions. And again, you'll notice that everything I'm drawing ends up in that top plane, right? And when I get out of this now, if I just double click in the graphics area, now I'm still in the 3D sketch, but I'm now back to drawing in any plane that I want, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw one of the legs. So we'll go ahead and click this endpoint and draw this down, and we're going to make this we'll make this 28. Now I'm actually going to avoid putting the dimension on here because this is the third tip that I want to give you guys, and that is that when you go to add a dimension, you know, basically by default, what it tries to do is it attempts to add the dimension in the plane that's most closely parallel to the screen, right? So if I select this line, and I draw off my dimension, you can notice that it's orienting the dimension most parallel to my screen. If I escape out of that and we rotate this around, I can dimension this way, and it's now coming off in the XY plane, right? So here's kind of my third tip when it comes to this. If you start your dimension and you realize that, you know, actually I want the dimension oriented in a different plane, again, the tab key becomes your friend here. If you hit tab once before you place the dimension, it almost looks like it disappears. If you hit tab again, it toggles the dimension to the other plane, right? And then I can just click to place it, add in the value. In this case, it's going to be 28. And now I've got the, I've got my dimension where it needs to be, and it's oriented the way I want without having to escape, rotate it around, and then place it, right? So 3 tips for 3D sketching. Like a lot of things, I would tell you that, you know, it comes down to kind of learning it, practicing it, and then keeping it simple. I am going to go ahead and we're going to add the center leg in here. We're going to make this and this equal to each other, like so. Okay. That is our so that's going to be our layout for this for the majority of this design. Okay, so here we go. So we've got our layout. That's looking good. Let's go ahead and start adding our lumber to this kind of skeleton sketch that we have. My colleagues have done actually a really great job of giving some insight into how to build custom profiles. So if you haven't watched Mike Sandy's or Jordan Tadic or Juan's, those are all other great examples of utilizing the Weldment environment. And they also have access to wood profiles that you can download or tips on how to create your own. So I'm not going to go into that today. We're going to focus on just a few other things related to building this out. So here we're going to make this out of 2x6, and we'll go ahead and place it on. We'll just start picking the lines that we want to add this to. Let's kick this around to 90 degrees, and we'll locate our profile to this point right here on the corner. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and just also select, now that we've got it oriented. I like orienting it first personally, and then I come back and I pick the rest of my segments. We're not gonna miter these. These are gonna be basically end butted. And so we wanna make sure that this one gets switched over, like so. And same with this one. Right, so that looks good. Okay, so we've got our first box in place and going, and now let's just use a simple pattern to go ahead and make. We're going to basically do 3 stacks of those. So we'll come in, grab our pattern, We'll indicate the direction we want to go. This is going to be just basic spacing. These are 5.5 inches. You know, it's typical 2x6 is going to be 1.5 by 5.5. So we're just going to space these at 5.5. We'll use 3, and then we're going to choose the bodies that we want to pattern. Right? So something like that. That looks good. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. All right. So as I said, I made these out of pine. That was one of those things that, you know, there was kind of 3 things that I looked at. This had to be materials had to be readily available. I didn't want to break the bank, and I wanted it to be food safe. So I ended up doing it out of pine. So let's just go ahead and add a material to this. So there's actually some wood that's placed in your libraries, in this case pine. And just as a side tip, a lot of people don't always realize that if you use materials a lot, you can come over and just click on the favorites and add it to your favorites list. And, you know, obviously order these to however you use them most, but this makes them really accessible so that you're not having to go through the full library each and every time, right? So there we go. We're going to go ahead and make this out of pine. Looks good. All right, so we'll go ahead and add the, we're going to add the legs in. So again, we'll use this as structural member, 2x6, grab this line right here, locate that to this corner, like so, and that looks good. Now, we're going to do the other side of the leg too, and this is one area where I do like to, I did tweak the library profiles, and I'll explain to you why I did this. You know, specifically in woodworking, it's not uncommon to take 2 boards, right, and lap them, right, like that. So you're basically going to lap them right over the top of each other, so that you've got you know, you've got something to screw into, and so, you know, what I did was with these profiles, and you may have noticed it already, I just went in and actually added those common lap points to my profile. So if we rotate this around 90 degrees, and then if we go in and hit the locate profile, what you'll see is I've gone into that library feature part, and I've just added those common points where you're typically going to overlap another thickness of wood. And that's oftentimes going to be 0.75, which is that point, or 1.5, which is this point right here. And so, you know, by doing that, I don't have to create an extra sketch just to place this board. I can just pick that from my profile. Again, it just saves me some extra time and it kind of simplifies how the model looks, keeping it nice and clean, right? This actually can be applicable to actual metal welded structures too. If you've got your plate steel set up as profiles, you know, oftentimes you may want to do a scenario where, like, you know, if this is your plate, and this is the radius on your tube, you know, you can run your plate right up on the tangent of that radius, and that gives a spot for you to lay your weld on the tube, like if you're going to actually put plate steel on your tube. So incorporating that point into that profile just helps you to add those offsets in, those really common offsets that you're doing a lot, without having to create an extra sketch line or do some crazy things with your you know, the skeleton sketch that you're doing. So just something to keep in mind. If that's something you do, then yeah, that's something I would definitely recommend. All right, so let's go ahead and also add in the center leg. All right, so we'll do this. We'll locate the profile. We're just going to center that up right there. That looks good. And then, like I said, there's a lot of symmetry to this design. So let's go ahead and get back. So we added our center leg to this design, and that was just a matter of coming in and selecting the line where we're going to add that 2x6, and then we're going to mirror these others to the other side. So we'll come in and do a mirror. Again, we'll do the bodies to mirror here, here. That. So that looks that's looking good, right? So we've got half of this ready to go. Okay, so let's rotate this around. We're going to go ahead and add in the runner, and the runner is what's going to support the slats that we have coming across here. This is another great tip that I think a lot of you probably are aware of, but if you click on a face and you want to pick the face behind it, just hit this icon, select other. It gives us a chance to pick that bottom face of the board where we want to start our sketch. And I have my sketch, like insert sketch, mapped to a hotkey. Some of you may have it mapped to like the shortcut keyboard or mouse gestures. I use it enough, and I like keyboard shortcuts that I just map it to a key. Maybe in the comments, what do you guys use? Do you like using the wheel, or do you like using the shortcut keyboard? What's your favorite way to get to your commands? Okay, so here, let's go ahead and just take that and convert the edge into a sketch. And then we're gonna go ahead and select to add this is gonna be a 2x4 that we add here. So we'll select 2x4, select the line. And again, we're just gonna orient ourselves 90 degrees and locate the profile. Okay, so now we've got the board that's going to represent where we're going to put our slats for the runner. And the thing about this is that, right now I'm interfering with the geometry, and I know that, I can see it. But just as a quick tip, interference detection actually works inside of parts. So you can go to the Evaluate tab, select Interference Detection, and calculate, just like you would in an assembly. And you can see exactly where you may have interferences with your weldment. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're designing. You can do interference detection on your weldments. So what I'm going to do is, to get rid of that, is we're going to use the trim extend command. So trim extend, we'll select what we want to trim, which is a runner, and then we're going to pick the two faces that we want to trim up. So these two faces, and then I'm just going to draw your attention to this section down here at the bottom where we have the weld gap. And weld gap can be really handy for when you're doing actual steel structures. Like one of the things I would recommend is definitely talk to your fabricators and your welders, because they oftentimes are going to have, you can make their life easier a lot of times if they have just a little bit of play in the structure, in the cut links, because you can fill in or bridge a lot of gap with weld. And it may make their life easier as they go to fixture it up, because they're not having to fight it as much. The other nice thing about this is that if for some reason it was too long or it didn't quite fit, that typically means they got to do a lot of grinding on the end of it. So main takeaway is, talk to your welders. You can make their life easier, and you can, design better products in the meantime as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a gap in, because wood isn't always perfectly straight. And sometimes it's got different cambers to it and different bends. And you may be like, if you're just slightly out of square, having a board that is the exact length, you're going to end up fighting it and putting undue stress on it. So I put about a 16th inch of a gap in here. You know, that ends up being an 1/8 inch either way. And it helps to, especially in a structural, setup like this, it helps to just make your life a little bit easier. You're not fighting that board to get it in. It just fits in there nice and you can center it up accordingly. Okay. All right, so there's our design. We're gonna go ahead and just mirror all of that to the other side. Okay, so we're gonna do that across the front plane. We'll grab our bodies, and that's just gonna be each of our legs and that runner piece. Okay. All right, so here is the so here's our design so far. Let's go ahead and add in the slats. So again, this is just going to be a sketch that we start on this face. Now remember, we've got a little bit of a gap in here, so I'm actually gonna pull this line up, pull the edge off the board of this face into my layout sketch, okay? Because I want the slat to actually bump right up against the edge face here, and this is going to be again a 2x6. So yes, these are beefy garden boxes. All right, so it's going to be 2x6. We'll just go ahead and locate the profile right here, like so. Now, here's the thing about this one. This doesn't have any interferences, okay? The 2x6 butts right up against this face. The end of it butts right up against this face. But something to keep in mind, even though I don't have any interferences, I can still use the trim extend command to build in the weld gap. So I can, instead of having to mess around with the length of that line, I can say I want to trim this. You go ahead and pick the faces that you want to reference, so this face and this one. But I'm just able to use that feature to add the gap in that I need, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. Same idea here. When I go to put this board in, I don't want to have to fight it, right? To get it in there, and a little bit of play on each side just ends up making everybody's life a little easier when you're building something like that. Strong like bull. Yeah, exactly, Eric. We have a saying in Indiana that when in doubt, build it stout, right? I think that's probably kind of a ubiquitous saying, but we tend to we tend to own it. So at any rate, so we've got that in. Now, this presented one of those interesting challenges that SolidWorks was great for solving. When you do a box like this, you actually have to have a way for the water to get out of the box. So you can't just butt these slats up one against each other all the way across. You actually want some spacing, and I was shooting for like 1/4 of an inch or so, and I was like, oh man, now I gotta try to figure out how many of these I need and all that stuff. And then it dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute, we've got this feature with inside of linear patterns that allow me to basically just indicate up to reference. So I can pick the direction that I want to do the pattern. I'm going to use the up to reference, and I'm going to say I want to basically pattern up to this face, and I want it to, let's go ahead and select the bodies here that I want to add, which is this one. And then I can indicate where I want it to be kind of referenced from. In this case, I want to use this face here. And then I'm going to start playing around with the number of instances I need, right? And so now visually, I can just start seeing, okay, it looks like, 10, 10's going to fit great. You could also do this based on just driving the distance that you want, but that worked great. And like I said, I was just wanting something fairly close. And this is one of my other tips. A lot of times I think we have to use the measure tool to figure out dimensions. you know, quick thing, if I just pick two faces, just hold down Control, pick two faces, you can, you can identify, you can identify the distance right there in the normal distance down here at the bottom of the screen, right? So, yeah, so it's looking pretty good. We've got our spacing in there that we need. And the last thing we want to do is we just want to put a little bit of trim around the top of this. It just kind of cleans it up. You know, you don't have to do this, but, you know, inevitably you're going to be leaning over. You're going to likely need to be able to set something on there. And so we're going to go ahead and do structural member. I'm going to put a 2x4 around the outside. Now, again, this is another one of those things where having those offsets in your profile becomes super handy, because you notice I haven't had to do a whole lot of sketching other than, you know, this line and this line outside of what my my skeleton sketch was. So when you look at this, if you come in and locate your profile again, I can just again simply pick the point that represents my 1.5 inch offset, and that now gives me the perfect amount of lap to where my board is, right? So easy enough to do. We'll go ahead and pick the rest of our lines, right? Now, this is an option. Depending on your comfort level, you actually could just leave these just like this. And I'm gonna grab my endpoint here and set this one so it extends out. If you don't have a miter saw, or your miter saw only does straight cuts, this is an easy way to just put a nice little trim board around the outside without any additional complication to it. Now, alternatively, you can do you can throw a miter in there, and it just, you know, adds a nice little touch to things, and you know, that gives you a nice clean corner. So yeah, it's up to you based on the tools that you have, your comfort level with doing this. Again, just a straight chop will give you a real nice trim as well. Miter just adds a little bit of extra to it, right? All right, so yeah, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and save this. And we'll call this garden box. Okay, good. So perfect. Yeah, let's do some stuff with drawings now. So we've got this. We've got our. If you're kind of new to Weldments, we've got our cut list. Simply telling this to go ahead and either update or update automatically. We'll just constantly be updating it as you're designing. But now I've got all my cut list items, which is great. And let's go ahead and create a drawing. I want to show you a couple things with drawings that, again, will be helpful for this project, but also just in general when it comes to documenting your designs, whether they're steel or other. That'll be handy. So let's start with, we'll put an isometric view on here. And let's just hide sketches. We're not going to use those, so we'll turn those off. Now here's a couple things. Maybe you're using your work computer, you've got your work templates. You know, this is something that we want to do, maybe document in inches as opposed to metric. So down here in the right-hand corner, easy way to switch your units. Just come up here and just say, you know, I want to do this in inches, since this is just kind of a home project. So that'll switch our units. And so now we're good to go. Let's go ahead and also add a Weldment cut list table to this. So we'll do Weldment cut list. Just accept the default, which will work good for this project. So I also want to point out here that we've got the all of our links are in inches, which is great. That's what we wanted. But now also, you know, they're in decimals. And so I worked as a machine designer with fabricators for a while, and oftentimes they're just cutting the steel with a chop saw or a bandsaw, and it's if it's a one-off, a lot of times it actually is a guy with a tape measure, and he knows what the decimal values are, but a tape measure obviously isn't in decimals, and so you can make their life a lot easier if you switch it to fractions. And your options, so again, you can come in here and say edit document properties. It'll take you right to this area. And you can say, I want to do this in fractions, let's say 16th, and round to the nearest fraction. And that will actually control not only your dimensions, but it controls how your table is displayed as well. Okay, so that drives both. All right, let's add some balloons, right? So how are we doing in the chat here? Cool. All right, so we're gonna do a few other things. Thanks guys for helping to answer some of the questions, jumping in there. We'll go ahead and auto balloon. Couple preference things, just me personally. When you have a lot of line-on-line contact like this part does, one of the things that's kind of handy is you can change the leader attachment so that it's attached to the faces, right? And this will reattach the balloons so that their endpoints align on the face, right? So you can readjust those to where they need to be, and you may even say, well. The other thing that I find helpful sometimes as well is to uncheck this ignore multiple instances. Now, yes, you will end up with a lot more balloons, and there's situations where you don't always want to do this, but it can come in handy when you're looking at a certain part of the drawing and you want to just verify that, okay, all three of these boards are item number 2, right? Or whatever it might be. And and then like I said, it also is handy just to be able to clean these up so that you can see exactly the face or the part that it's associated to. Now, completely up to you on what your preference is, but these are just some things that personally, and actually when I was building this, I was like, man, I really wish I would have called out some of all these boards so that I could just easily look at them and see, what they were. All right, so that looks good. Let's add a couple more views on here. All right, so let's add our front view, put a top view, and then a right side view. And I'm also going to go ahead and just change the scale of these. Let's just back them down a little bit. Maybe not that much. 1 to 100 is a little much. We'll do 1 to 12 here. Obviously, you can come in and add some dimensions. Another thing that just came in handy when I set these, I actually put them up on concrete blocks. So I made sure everything was level, and I needed to know center to center of the legs. And, obviously, if I throw a dimension from here to here, that's center to center. But just for the sake of showing another option, if you right click on an edge instead of left clicking, you have the option to say select midpoint. And then you can do it over here too. I can say select midpoint, and that'll give me the distance. Now, you can just say I want to keep this dimension driven, but that now will give you your reference the center line of those edges. And like for me, I could tell exactly where I needed to put my concrete blocks that I set this on. Another thing that's handy here as well is you can come in and do a detailed view. Let's put this on here. Right, because maybe I want to be able to reference the distance in between my slats. So this is where rounding the fraction can come in handy. If you remember, the actual distance between these two was 0.22. in woodworking like this, you're not gonna. I mean, that's like a 30-second off of a quarter of an inch. So it's easier just to say I want a quarter of an inch. So that can come in handy. My other tip, specific to detail views, sometimes people don't realize this, but if you want to change the scale and the detail, you can say, well, maybe I want this to be 1:8. You can actually do it right here. If you just double click on the annotation and you say, I want this to be 1:8, it will actually drive the scale of the detail view, right? So another little just time saver. You don't have to make your way all the way over to the properties. You can just manage it there. Okay, cool. So good to go there. So let's do this. This came up in actually some of the other live sessions. People were just curious how to go about detailing detailing parts on a weldment. And I'll show you two methods. I'll try to give a little bit of insight on why, one over the other. The first method you can do is you can come in and say drawing. You can just choose a normal model view. We want to obviously make it for the garden box. And you can then say, I want to do a top view, but I want to select the bodies, right? So if you choose this, it's pretty straightforward. You just pick the body you want, you hit OK, and it places the top view of just that body in the orientation that it is in the model. Okay, so pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Where you have to be a little bit careful, where it starts to break down a little bit, is that you need to. It does take the orientation of the model itself. Okay, so if I want to come in and if we were to do this again. Right, so if I do a model view again, let's do the garden box and we'll select the body. Here's the thing. If I select this one, it's going to take that orientation, right? Not overly ideal. You can actually get around this. This tip actually applies to a lot of views. You can just rotate it. Right? So if you pick the rotate button, you can take the drawing view and you can spin it around and rotate it to a different orientation. Okay. Now, why am I showing this? Well, it can be just a kind of a down and dirty way to get get a detail of just that part. But it's also helpful if you do sheet metal weldments. So if you have multiple sheet metal parts and you need to be able to show the flat for one of the sheet metal pieces, that's a way to get the flat into your drawing. The more, I'll just say, robust way that gives you more control over doing this is to do a relative view. Okay, so if I do relative view, I can select the model I want to use. I can do the same thing, select bodies, and choose this body. And then I can say my first orientation, my front, is going to be here. And the top is going to be this, right? So I'm actually controlling the orientation of the model. So my sound is, can you guys... my sound suddenly got, okay, not as loud. All right, let's double check. We'll make sure that my microphone is still set. Turn up the gain. It's still showing that, let's turn the gain up a little more. Check. Can you guys hear me? Lost me on select bodies. So are you guys hearing me now? Any better? Check. Something switched in my audio. Okay. So you can still hear me on my phone. Okay, so that's good feedback. Guess we'll, are you guys able to hear me at all, or is it just quiet? It still says that I'm using my mic here, the one I've got set. Still low. Okay. Well, let's try to. I guess we'll push on. If you maybe just try to turn the volume up a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why all of a sudden it's changed. Let's try to. Let's see here. Check. Check. We'll try that. We'll see if we can get it any better. All right. Set to 100%. Man. All right. All right. Sorry, guys. I'll just try to speak louder, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what's causing what the. Check. Check. Just speak in all caps from now on. All right. I'll speak extra loud for, we'll pretend like this is all in caps for right now. All right. Sorry about that, guys. So here we go. Lost my train of thought. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So now we've got the relative view. Another just little tip here is that if you add the relative view, now it's gone completely. Man, all right. It's showing that it's on here, so tough go at it today. Hey, we're back. Okay. Cool. All right. So here's the thing: relative view gives you the most amount of control with the with how you place your and how you orient how you place and how you orient the model. So here's the thing, though, a little trick. If for some reason you need to place a relative view that isn't the model that you have on the screen, here's the trick. You start relative view. Then you right click and you say insert from file. And if you say insert from file, it'll actually let you go out and browse a completely different part file, and it'll allow you to create a relative view of a completely different file. Now, where this comes in handy is the fact that you can, maybe you want to create these details on different drawing files, okay? So that's a way to be able to do that. You can just say insert from file, go out and browse, and it'll grab it. Okay. Cool. So we've got that. We've got our two details. That's good. Next thing we want to do here is let me show you one other trick. A lot of times when you're creating these types of views, putting details, you want to put almost like little mini title block pieces of information on the drawing. So here's a little trick that you can do. Create your note, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the orientation. I'm going to lock the orientation of my view by double clicking on it. So by double clicking on it, anything you do now, any note that you add, doesn't matter where you add it. Like I could literally add it out here, right? Just make a note. This now allows you, if you move that view, that note will come with it. So that's one of the advantages of double clicking on the view to lock its focus, is that note will travel with the view, right? And to unlock the view, you just double click on the drawing. So I'm gonna lock my view. I'm gonna come in here and add a note, and I am gonna use the leader just initially, okay? So this is, and we'll just do something like, we'll say description, and I'm gonna link it to some properties. So we'll say we wanna link to the component to which the annotation is attached. Now here's the thing, this option right here, at least for weldments, only shows up when you've got a leader line attached, okay? And by selecting it, that's when the property names then show up. So here's my description. I'll say okay. I'll hit enter, and we'll say, we'll do length as the other. So we'll select length and hit our custom property and add that in. So component to which the annotation is attached, we'll add the length, hit OK. Great. Now that you have those two values, you can get rid of the leader line. So I'm going to come in and turn off the leader. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make this into a block. Right? So we'll make this a block. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to save this block. Right, so I'm going to save this block, and we'll just call it detail notes. Okay, call this detail notes, and I'm going to save it into my library. And here's the thing, like a lot of times you run into drawings where, especially on a weld drawing, you're going to have your orthogonal views, but then it's not uncommon to have a bunch of the piece part details on the same drawing, whether for reference or because they're going to make it off the same drawing. And if you have to go around to every one of those views and do this, it's just really time consuming. But if you make it a block, then you can just come over to your library, grab the note that we just created, right? So in this case, it could be, I'm just going to use one I already created, but same idea. Oh, here we go, detail notes. This is the one I created. So we're just going to drag this on, right, to this view. Let me unlock the view. That helps. So I unlock the view, and now if I drag this note onto the view, it fills itself out based upon what's already in the block. Right? So now if you've got like 8 details on the drawing, you can just start dragging and dropping this block, and it just starts filling that information out on the views, right? So helpful here for this project, but also hopefully you see some value in that if you're actually creating fabrication prints. Cool. All right. So another tip. This isn't quite as clean, but it's still helpful. Is if you also want to tie this to the balloon, you can put a little note right there, and like this is our 37, so that's number 7. Just click the balloon, and now it's dynamically linked to the balloon, so that if we come up here and we decide that this no longer needs to be number 7, it actually needs to be like number 5. The balloon number now updates too, right? So you can link all this together, and you can start to create just a really nice, clean, a nice clean drawing that has all your details, has all the information, etc. on the drawing. All right, so we've got a nice looking drawing. We've got a few minutes left. I want to show you just two more things when it comes to this. First one is just a little bit of I want to turn you on to a tool that I found, a little utility that's super helpful when you go to create, when you go to get your cut list. Buy your actual lumber, right? So if you look, this is all of our lumber. It's got all of our cut links. That's all super helpful. But we got to be able to buy, some raw stock to actually make this. Let's move this up here. So one of the things I found is this website that really kind of changed, made my life so much easier. It's called OptiCutter. It's free. You can use it, and you can, there's no cost to it. You can come in and say, all right, let's take our 2x6s first, and I'm going to do my stock length, which is typically 96. You can enter in a kerf. So if you have a saw cut, the amount of material the saw takes out is basically your kerf. So for this, we're not going to worry too much about that. But then you can just start adding your links. So I'm going to come in and say first length is 60 and I need 6 of them. And then I need a length of 6, I'm sorry, the next one is 30 and I need 6 of those. And then I need 28. And we're going to do 10 of those. And we'll do one more, right? So we need 10 that are 29 and 29.875. So here's the cool thing about this little tool is now I can say solve and it literally gives me the full breakdown, right? I got to go out and buy 13 2x6s. It shows me exactly what I'm going to cut them out of. It shows me which boards it's coming out of, and it shows me the waste, right? So how much drop I'm going to have from each board. And then you can actually print this thing, right? And so then you can run it again for your 2x4s in this case, but super, super helpful when it comes to just being able to generate your, what you have to do to, or what you're going to need when you go into your lumber or hardware store. So just something to help try to make your life a little bit easier, at least makes my life a lot easier. So that was one. The other bonus thing I want to just highlight for you, since we've got a few minutes left, is weldments are part files. And part files allow you to save geometry inside of them. So what does that mean? It means that if you design a lot of frames, and let's say 80% of them are always the same, model up your frame and then make it a template, right? So have a weldments tab. If you do machine table, tables that your machines sit on, have a template where all that geometry is already there. And now all I've got to do is adjust my layout sketch. Right? So it's just a way because weldments are part files, they can contain starter geometry. And this becomes a really quick way to say, hey, every time we build one of these tables, it's always the same. It's always the same table, except we change these 5 dimensions, right? And so this gets everybody going in the right direction on the design. All right, so thank you guys for your patience. Thank you. I apologize for the audio issues. Not exactly sure what was going on, but hopefully you learned 1 or 2 things from this presentation. Hopefully you feel like, if you want, you can go out and build this weekend. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, share, and join us for another Solidworks Live. We've got a number of them teed up for the next couple of weeks, so please join us again. So thanks, guys.